The only news coming out of D.C. as 2012 came to an end was, of course, the fiscal cliff. Congress working through Christmas, the senators actually having to work on New Year's Eve, and then finally they came up with a deal on taxes so the issue could be put to rest for a long time. Thank God we never have to talk about that anymore.
More taxes?
We're talking about looking at the tax code, putting everything on the table.
The tax issue is finished, over, completed. That's behind us.
How much more revenue can we get?
Joining me now to discuss why we're all still talking about debt and taxes and what we're not talking about as a result are comedian and author of Moment of Clarity, Lee Camp, editor-in-chief of thecontributor.com, Tina Dupuy, and back with us is Sam Cedar from Ring of Fire and The Majority Report. Thank you all for joining us. It's a pleasure to have some great guests. And this kind of feels like the scene in Citizen Kane as the couple became further and further apart. So I'll begin with you, Sam. Should we be surprised that 82% of the Bush tax cuts have now been made permanent? Is this really a victory?
Not, I think, you know, for those people who feel that we need more revenue, or those people who feel that, you know, that this is the best way to, I guess, some type of economic prosperity. I mean, I think, you know, right now, the bottom line is you don't want to impose austerity on our economy. We need jobs. That's the only conversation that's not happening, and it's really the only one that really matters. And so I think, you know, we're seeing the Democrats come out and ask for more revenue as a way of sort of this whole kabuki theater where I think there's a real desire to cut social service programs. So, you know, if we need to justify more revenue as opposed to cutting Social Security programs or social, you know, insurance, fine. But it's really there. It has nothing to do with what's really going on in the country right now. We have 7.8% unemployment, and that's just not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, we keep saying it time and time again. We don't have a deficit problem. We have a revenue problem. And Tina Dupuy, let me ask you. President Obama had the American Jobs Act last year, 60% tax cuts, but I call it the Boo Radley bill because it never made it out of the House. Considering that it was 60% tax cuts and the Republicans still killed it, what can President Obama do to help spur job creation at this point?
Yeah, not much of anything right now. I mean, what we need to stop doing is stop pretending that Republicans really care about the debt. They are the ones that voted in for the Bush tax cuts now. 3 times. They're the ones who put 2 unfunded wars on a credit card. I mean, and now they are pretending, you know, very disingenuously that they really care about the debt when it comes to poor people getting services. So that's what we need to stop pretending right there. What can Obama do? Hopefully something. I mean, what we thought he could do 4 years ago with a Congress like this, you know, it's anyone's guess.
Lee, what's your take? Has Obama painted himself into a corner by making these deals with the GOP? He can't go any further on revenue? Is he boxed in?
I mean, it's just it's all a catastrophe. It's a logjam. It's you know, it's a congressional difficulties is what it feels like. I mean, the idea that they care about the debt. What was the CBS report that just came out? They spent over $50 million just fighting against health care. And they'll spend that money. I'm beginning to think the Republicans don't care about poor people.
Well, you know, thank God we have Michelle Bachmann, because she cares about comedians, introducing another bill to repeal Obamacare, which she called the job-killing health care bill, which is hilarious, Sam. My take is, it's very simple. Anyone who supported the Iraq war is never, ever allowed to complain about debt. Considering these guys raised the debt ceiling 17 times under the previous occupant of the White House, are they just counting on profound ignorance of Fox News viewers to keep this going?
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's also, it's not just Fox News viewers. It's also sort of, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars from Pete Peterson. There's been an attempt, again, to shrink government, to cut social services, to cut social insurance, and this is all part of it. No, of course they don't care about the debt. And frankly, there's no real reason at this point to be caring about the debt. What people should be caring about, again, is jobs. And, you know, as far as President Obama boxing himself in, I am fairly convinced that there is at least substantial evidence out there that from day one, prior to him even being inaugurated, that he wanted to strike some type of grand bargain which included cuts to so-called entitlements. And I am quite convinced that in the White House there's a couple of buckets there that need to be filled in terms of a legacy. And when we look back on President Clinton's welfare reform, which really was a disaster for a lot of people, and we're seeing the implications of it at a time of joblessness, at a time where more people need to go on food stamps, I'm quite convinced that within the administration there's a sense that our legacy is not complete unless we get one of those big counterintuitive reform packages, which would mean some type of reform of Social Security or Medicare. In other words, cuts to beneficiaries in one form or another. And so I'm not quite convinced that he has mistakenly boxed himself in. At this point, I think there is a trajectory, and so far we're following that trajectory. And we see it, not just with President Obama, but other Democrats.
All right, let me open that up to everybody, because first off, I try to always make sure I never call these things entitlements. I call them earned benefits, and I'd like to see more Democrats and progressives get in the habit of doing that. But considering that he did raise the specter of raising, excuse me, the retirement age by 2 years and had his hat handed to him by his own base, do you guys really think that Barack Obama wants to go down in history as the president who cut Social Security? I mean, will he put himself in that historical position?
Well, I don't. What's he worried about? A blog that I'm going to write, or is he worried about the hundreds of millions of dollars that Pete Peterson's going to sink into the history books? I mean, look, there's. I don't think that President Obama fears the base necessarily, and it's not just the base. I mean, there's nothing more beloved in this country than Social Security.
Yeah.
You get 80% of the population. That includes the Tea Partiers. That includes, maybe some small quadrant of libertarians don't like it. But you're talking about the vast amount of American people. But, now it's being sold, Social Security cuts as some type of a tweak to the inflation, adjustment, which, of course, as everyone knows, is just a story. It's a cut and by some other name. So, yeah, I think that there is a sense that you do something counterintuitive like this, the Washington Post will applaud, and that's the end of the story.
Well, I want to come back to that note. I also want to ask you guys what you think of today's decidedly right-wing appointments by this allegedly left-wing president, and I'll do my best to bridge the gap between us. Coming up, when all is said and done, what will the president's new cabinet look like? Well, older and whiter, I guess. More with our panel coming up next. Hillary Clinton finishes a distinguished term as Secretary of State. Conservative critics got in their last cheap shots, accusing her of faking a concussion and a blood clot. Here's Fox News with their non-apology.
Gutfeld is making an actually good, valid point that the critics who are demanding an apology don't really care about Mrs. Clinton's health.
Not at all.
They just want to try to embarrass their ideological opposition.
I will even go even further and say that they don't mind that she's sick because it helps them prove their point.
Now you're going over the line.
I want to go over the line, damn it.
I like Greg Gutfeld. I've done his show, but if he was any more starved for attention, it would require a benefit concert. For this and other thoughts on the Obama cabinet, let's bring it back to our guests, comedian Lee Camp, Tina Dupuy, and radio host Sam Cedar. Folks, thank you again so much for joining us. And Lee, I want to begin with you. What is the conservatives' long-term feud with Hillary Clinton all about? In the 90s, they hated her. In the aughts, when she was voting for most of what President Bush wanted in the Senate, they thought she was just dandy. And now that they realize if she decides to run, they have no one who can beat her, are they just back to full-throttle vintage 90s Hillary hate again?
Yeah, I mean, they hate the Clintons in general, but then the idea of a woman with power, ooh, that's scary. So I think that really bugs them. But this was kind of a new low, the whole faking the concussion thing, because, I mean, you look at those goons, like, just sitting around. I mean, Talking Heads is a grandiose job title for those three sitting around.
Well, let's go beyond Talking Heads. This was Alan West, who is so psychotic as Thorazine flushed itself down the toilet, but he was elected to Congress, and he, along with John Bolton, America's favorite lunatic at the UN, both accused her of the Benghazi flu, faking it to avoid having to testify about this. Now, I think any humans who accuse Hillary of faking her blood clot should be accused of faking being human. But, Sam, can we see more of this now? Is it going to be more Hillary hate from these guys? Like, will we be hearing the name Vince Foster again?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, look, there's very little agenda that the Republican Party has right now. So, sort of spinning these conspiracy tales basically serves the same function, which is to maintain their audience, to build a narrative that has nothing to do with reality. And then it's very hard to debunk. I mean, how do you debunk these type of fantastical notions. It's like trying to debunk, Peter Pan. I mean, honestly, this is what they do. We see it across the board, whether it's Freedom Works or Dick Morris or whatever these fictions are. These are carnival barkers. And so if it's not Hillary Clinton, it'll be some other sort of narrative that is so far removed from reality that it's almost impossible to attack.
Well, let's talk about one of those narratives that's so far removed from reality. By the way, I feel like the maid in the Carville Mary Magdalene house doing this right now. But let's talk about what we're hearing about how much Chuck Hagel hates Israel. Tina, is this narrative going to stick at all? Considering the ADL is not objecting to this nomination, do the Republicans have any hope of painting him as a heroic Jew hater?
Anybody who has the stamp of approval from Barack Obama, Republicans, just as a reflex, have to hate. That's just kind of they are. I really do believe that they are doing some soul searching right now. They're not going public with it, but they are trying to figure out what they do to go forward to build their base, because right now they're doing pretty much the same thing. I mean, you mentioned Michelle Bachmann introduced yet another piece of legislation, and a symbolic piece of legislation that will go nowhere and will never happen, to repeal Obamacare. They're kind of just they have the one-hit wonder that keeps on now skipping a note. And it's gotten smaller and smaller, and they're appealing to fewer and fewer people. And, I mean, this stuff's really getting old.
Well, yeah, but when you consider the fact that the president's nominating two of the most hardline conservative guys to run defense and CIA.
And they still don't like him.
Well, so Lee, what's your take on this? I mean, considering that we've got, John Brennan now in charge of the CIA, and I can't imagine a biographer wanting to sleep with him. He scares me through the TV. But does it mean that we've given up on reform, or is Hagel a sign that we really mean to have real reform?
Well, with Brennan, we've certainly given up on reform in that area. I mean, it's like, he knows torture. He loves torture. He's really good at torture. Let's put him in charge of regulating torture.
He doesn't want to bomb Iran.
Doesn't
want to bomb Iran.
Well, I was talking about Brennan.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
Oh, yeah.
So, there's that going for him.
You got that going for him. But then we're talking about Treasury Secretary. That's coming up too. And that it's like, just don't. I feel like they're gonna pick. Well, let's find. We need to regulate greed. Let's find someone who's really good at greed. Like that's, and I feel like that's gonna happen there too. So if you see it down the line, I mean, with Hagel, I guess it's a little better than what it could have been.
I don't know why you hate freedom, but you know what? There's this grassroots campaign now, Sam, to nominate Paul Krugman for the Treasury, which I would love to see. I would also love to see Luke Skywalker run the Department of Labor.
Right.
Is this going to happen? I mean, not that it would ever happen, but I mean, do you think that we can hope for any kind of progressive reform? Not quite a Krugman, but anyone like that in Treasury?
No.
Can it be better?
Come on,
would anyone be better than Geithner? Would anyone be better than Geithner?
Well, I'm sure there'll be people better than Geithner, but a lot of the stuff, the ship has sailed in a lot of respects in terms of, the sort of the huge giveaways to the banks and in terms of their culpability, and the program is still to protect the banks. I don't anticipate that anyone who we see in that position is going to have any less of a hostile position towards the banks. So, look, Paul Krugman would never do that.
Sam, but you depress me, and yet you fill me with hope. That's okay.
That's what I'm here for.
Sam Cedar from Ring of Fire Radio, comedian Lee Camp, and the brilliant Tina Dupuy of thecontributor.com. I hope you all will come back and join me here again, maybe. Thank you. Okay.
Definitely.
Coming up, a few words about our friend and yours, Mr. Elliot Spitzer.